Hi, everyone. I don't see you, but hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions that you've got. And as I'm going through this, feel free to ask questions, have any feedback, and whatnot. So this is the brain booster for behavioral language of people with a disability. And it's designed for parents and family members and teachers and EAs and community carers who are worried about a child's, an adolescent's, or an adult's behavior. And you might already be seeing behaviors that are challenging. The people may already have a diagnosis or be in the assessment stages of having a diagnosis. But whatever the case is, we find, especially for parents, they're under a lot of pressure to try to solve behavior issues that are there. And, of course, they're going to be worried about trying to find the best approach possible. And for teachers and EAs, as well as the community carers that are out there, you're feeling the pressure as well. It's really easy to feel alone in the whole thing. So it can be a relief to know that you're not alone. Everyone's different. So first of all, we need to understand that there's not going to be any single answer for any difficulties or problems that you face. But it's also the understanding that it's also not anybody's fault. So the goal of this Brain Booster webinar is just to help you to understand the behavior so that you can become more proactive rather than reactive. Okay, because I have my notes here beside me too. So because you could be working with either children or students or adolescents or adults, I'm just going to kind of keep the term more generic and just use people or person to refer to an adolescent, a child, or an adult as well. So let's get this thing started. So first off, it's all about understanding the behavior, right? Young children have temper tantrums. Some teenagers will demonstrate other behaviors like ignoring their parents or slamming their bedroom door. But behavior can become challenging when it's harmful to the person or to other people, or when it interferes with the person being able to engage in life experiences, when it persists, when it's severe. When behavior is particularly difficult to change or to manage, we call it, behavior that challenges or challenging behaviors. As an adult, our challenge is to work out what is the person trying to tell us through their actions. What are the actions telling us about their needs and what's happening to them? So after today, I hope you're able to better work out how to help your person to meet their needs, including finding ways to help them use other more acceptable ways to communicate. One of the first things that I always teach students when it comes to behaviors is that one, we all engage in behaviors that challenge others at times. It's just part of being human. All behaviors are means of communicating to someone. They're trying to tell you something. A child, especially for a child, they're not doing these behaviors to get on your nerves, to annoy you. These are not intentional behaviors that we're talking about. These are behaviors that are trying to communicate something when they're not able to verbally tell you what's going on and what's wrong with them. So as we go through this, when you go on holidays and you go to a different country, typically you have a little pocket dictionary that helps you to understand another language, right? So in the spirit of this session, I wanted to give you a little behavioral language dictionary to kind of help you understand what some behaviors mean in a general sense. So if a child is hitting out, they might be saying, I want control. They're spitting out their food, I want control. If you're kicking the furniture, I want control. Swearing at staff, I want control. Face slapping, I want control. And refusing to participate, I want control. Now you might be thinking, well, that's nice, you want control, but that's not going to happen. But this isn't about allowing them to take over. This is them wanting a semblance of control. And that's a human right that we all have, whether we're typical or atypical. This isn't about taking over. This is about wanting to have a say, to have a choice. Typical people have this. And so should someone that has a disability. They should be able to have a say at times. So when they're hitting out or spitting out food or they're kicking furniture, you know, sometimes they're just trying to let you know that they're not happy about something. Something is bothering them. And they just need to feel that semblance of control so they can handle it much better. On the other side of that, in our behavioral dictionary, we have the English language translation of the behavioral language from the caregiver. So the caregiver sees the child doing those behaviors and they're thinking, I'm concerned about your behavior. You know, it's just saying, I don't like it and I need you to act differently. Or this program is for your own good. And we're telling them that we want control. This is for your good. It's, you know, but ultimately it's for us because then we don't have to deal with it, right? You need to learn to be appropriate is another way for adults to go, I want control. Or putting you into timeout is helping you. And again, that's us telling them that we want the control. And again, this isn't about control. We shouldn't be trying to take away a person's right to have a say. When we work with behaviors with anyone, the more that we can understand the behaviors, the more we're going to treat that person with respect and with dignity, right? We're going to work with the person rather than at the person. And to me, that's a really key thing. I regardless of how old the child is or what the disability is, you know, being able to work with them in supporting them to meet their needs. And yes, teaching them more appropriate ways is what the goal is, but it's not for us because it's not about us. It's always going to be about the person who's having the behavioral issues that is the one that is struggling, and our job is to help support them. Some points to consider. So all behavior communicates, and as such, behaviorists or those who want to use behaviorism must see behavior as a legitimate language that needs decoding, not just stopped right off the bat. We need to understand and figure it out. Anyone who attempts to program away a behavior without understanding its meaning is unethical. And we don't need to be right, but we need to have tried to interpret the language. Anything beyond that, you're working at the person and it's in your best interest. And this isn't about your best interest. This is about their best interest. Behavior programming, when successful, should leave the client in more control of their lives, not just their behavior under control, but giving them that feeling of being more in control. And when behavior program isn't successful, we should blame the hypothesis, meaning what we thought the behavior was saying to us was wrong and we need to try again. We shouldn't be blaming the client and we shouldn't be blaming staff. It just means that we have to try again to figure it out. Sometimes, you know, we're really lucky and we can figure it out the first time. Other times it can be a hit and miss and we don't figure it out the first time. And rather than be defeated, we need to just go back to the drawing board again and go, okay, if it wasn't that, maybe it was this. People with disabilities, just like those without disabilities and that, are going to require a broad palette of services, everything from art therapy to play therapy to psychoanalysis. Behavior therapy isn't always the treatment of choice. We have many other different types of therapies and treatments that we can use, everything from a response to intervention, where we're going to look at what can we put into place that could prevent behaviors from occurring in the first place, to positive behavior support, where we're going to put things into a positive frame of mind, and again, make those changes to the environment, make what we're saying to them put into a positive way rather than a negative way. Another point to consider is that medication is not an evil thing, but like behavioral therapy, it should not be used to control a person, but to assist them with control. And since some people without disabilities benefit from appropriate medication, so will some people with disabilities. Notice I'm saying some, not all. 7, a person who uses behavior approaches will soon see that the behavior often communicates about an inappropriate environment or an inappropriate treatment. And as such, the therapist is going to become very quickly and often very radically an advocate for those approaches that are going, okay, this is an inappropriate environment. So rather than trying to fix the child, let's fix the environment. What can we do to make the change to the environment that makes it better for them as well? And all of a sudden you become an advocate for doing that rather than trying to control. 8, there can be no one philosophy that determines how a diversity of people live. So using behavior technology to eradicate personal differences and personal choices, to me, is an Aryan concept that's very scary, because again, it's about that control and saying how this is how they have to be, no ifs, ands, or buts. And we wouldn't want that. We don't want that for our lives. We see that especially in 2020 with everything that is going on, you know, that philosophy of whether or not you approve of wearing masks or you're not wearing masks, or, you know, whatever it is, there is that diversity, and we can agree to disagree. But if we put it into a place where it's just, you have to, you know, there can be issues with that on both sides. So what are people trying to express to us? What are they trying to tell us? Well, if they're showing frustration, maybe it's that they can't do something, or they can't tell you what it is that they want. So it comes out in a frustration mode. An example of that, a little girl who's thirsty holds her cup up to her EA and shows the cup to the EA. And the EA goes, yep, that's a cup. And the child goes, so she puts the cup more into the EA's face, and they go, yes, it's a cup, put the cup down. See, right there, the EA is not paying attention to what those reasons are. And the child, nonverbal, isn't able to express she's thirsty. To her, giving her the cup is her way of saying, I'm thirsty. She doesn't have another way because no one's taught her that. If the EA continues to downplay what's going on with this child, the next step for this child, they're going to throw the cup at the EA. And it's not the child's fault. They've done the only thing they know how to tell you what it is that they want. And their frustration level is going to get higher and higher when we're not paying attention and we're not cluing in to what's happening. For fear, they might be scared of something or someone. They may have strong feelings, so they might be unhappy or angry about something, or they're disliking or unhappy about a situation. Anxiety, they can feel confused and worried and stressed, unable to think well. It's important to understand our brain works best when it's calm. And that goes for anyone, whether they have a disability or not. Your brain works much better when it's calm. Hyperactivity, they might have excess energy and they can't seem to burn it off. Or discomfort, they're in pain and they can't tell you what's going on. Other ones, attention. They're making attempts to meet their need for attention and attachment and interaction by behaving in a certain way. They want engagement from you. That's what they're looking for. For whatever reason, they want you to interact with them. If it's difficulty with understanding, then they may not know what to expect. So they need time to work out what you mean. And so they may not respond to an instruction the way that you want them to. They might not know what's happening around them or retain the information that you've given them. They're having difficulty processing and making sense of sensory experiences in the environment. Certain touches, noises, lights, smells can stress them out. Some children are hyper or hypo sensitive. And what we mean by that is that when somebody is hypersensitive to certain stimuli, it's too much. It goes to the extreme for them. So what we see is perfectly normal and we don't see what the issue is. On their side, if they're hypersensitive to any of those things, they're feeling it, 100 times more than how you're feeling it. If they're hyposensitive, that means that they're not getting enough of the stimuli and they need more of that stimuli rather than less of the stimuli. So they could be seeking the sensory input or experiences because they need much more in order to feel, in order to experience something. When we look at these, is this not everything that you want to have? So why would it be any different for anyone that has a disability? We want to ensure that every single person, regardless of whether or not they're a typical or an atypical person, has these needs met in one way or another on a regular basis. Everybody wants security and they want routine. I know for myself, I function much better when there's structure and when there's routine. If you saw my office area, I have a whiteboard in front of me that tells me all the tasks that I have to do. And I've got 3 calendars, not just one, 3 calendars on my other wall for separate groups of students that I work with. And having that routine, even my students, my adult learners, they like having that routine of knowing what's coming up and what's being done. Everybody likes to have some quiet ever so often, but they also like to have that stimulation. Everyone wants love and affection and friendship and variety in life rather than the same old every day. We want peace. We want health. Everybody wants respect and attention and reassurance, whether or not our feelings are valid or justified in somebody else's eyes. We still want to have that reassurance because for us, it is real. So for people with a disability, they need to have that reassurance rather than having it fluffed off and going, you're just being silly or don't worry about it. Or to them, it's very real. And we need to understand that. Everyone wants to feel appreciated. They want to be understood. People with a disability especially want to have an identity. They want to know who they are. They want to know their strengths. They want to know you know, who they are and the type of person that they are. They want to know that they're fun and they're loving and they're caring and they hold value and they have things to offer this world. Everyone wants to have fun. They want to be able to participate in as many things as possible and have as many of the same experiences as they can. They want structure, predictability, stability, intimacy, citizenship. You want to feel like you belong to the community that you live in, to be able to express themselves. They need a way to communicate. They want to feel like they have some freedom, that they have choice, that they feel safe, and tranquility. These are all things, and these are all needs that need to be met to either a greater or lesser degree, depending on what the situation is for that. Okay. Recognizing behavior triggers. So before we can talk about what to do or the kind of things that you can do, we have to be able to recognize the behavior triggers. And these are just some of the questions that we can ask. Notice that some of these questions with infants, when infants are crying, we ask ourselves, and we even ask them, even though we know as infants they're not going to respond to them. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you need your diaper changed? What's going on? But yet it seems as the child gets older, we stop asking these questions. And we start to make assumptions, and that becomes really dangerous when we do that, because the child is still developing, their brain is still developing. So we want to know, do they understand what they're being asked to do? And we don't want to make the assumption that they do because you told them. Just because you told them doesn't mean that they understand it. Do they understand the task asked of them or the steps that go with that? Are they familiar with the person who's working with them? Are other people spending time with them, chatting and developing relationships? Are the interactions between them and others positive and enjoyable? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Are they in pain? Are they tired? Is the situation too noisy for them? Are they too hot? Are they too cold? Are they getting the physical activity that they need across the day? Are they finding change too difficult to cope with? If the person starts to display a behavior that indicates that maybe they're anxious and distressed, you want to try to work out the cause and then address it. People who are nonverbal find it very difficult to identify and let you know what's upsetting them. And for people who are verbal, they may still find it difficult to identify and say what's bothering them. And if they're a person with very complex needs, they're going to find it even harder to understand and communicate their feelings. So we have to, have that almost read their mind attitude of seeing it and going, okay, so what's going on here? What's happening? When in the few times, especially this year, but a lot over the years when I've gone out somewhere, I watch people. It's one of the things that I enjoy doing. But I also like to watch a lot of parents and kids. And I can tell the kids that are hungry, that are tired, that need to sit down, that they're too hot, they're not being paid attention to. They're just dragged out to the store because mom and or dad have to go out and get things and they want to do it now. But the child needs a nap. The child needs to have their needs attended to as well. And I always think, if the shoe was on the other foot, how would you feel being dragged out to places and you're tired, and you just want to go home, and you just want to lay down, and you just want to rest, and no one's letting you do that, you would start to have behaviors. How would you want other people to acknowledge those behaviors and help you? And again, so when I look at that, I go, okay, that parent needs to take the child home. The child's hungry or tired or thirsty, or just pick the child up. But we need to start stepping back and really taking a look at what behavior triggers are. They are telling us things. When we pay attention to them, it's amazing how much easier things start to get. Because sometimes a behavior escalates because of us. You know, sometimes it's how we respond to a behavior that can either encourage the behavior or discourage the behavior from recurring, whether we mean to or not. I mean, I see a lot of parents, you know, unintentionally encouraging the behavior from occurring, and they really don't mean to. We just have to keep remembering and keep telling ourselves that they're trying to tell us something with their behavior. They might be screaming because they can't bear the door being shut, and they don't have the words to tell you that. Your child's behavior can be serving a purpose. They might be screaming because it helps to get other people to meet their need for interaction and connection, because they don't have the verbal to tell us. So when we can do things like using an ABC chart or a diary, that can help us to identify and manage triggers. And sometimes an ABC chart is just useful just to kind of get an idea about the purpose of a behavior. You know, so if you're curious about what could be happening to your child, and what support they might need, an ABC chart is a good thing to have. ABC is an acronym. So the A stands for antecedents, and these are the things that lead up to the behavior. It can be where people are, what's happening, who's there, what time of day it is, what day of the week it is, what people are saying. B is going to stand for the behavior, so that's what the person is actually doing, what the behavior looks like. And C stands for consequences. What happens in response to the child's behavior? What do other people do and say? What does the child do? And for those that are not familiar with this term, when we talk about consequences, we're not talking about good consequences or bad consequences. We're just talking about when a behavior happens, this usually is the result that comes out of that behavior. It's the consequence. And it can be a positive consequence. It can be a negative consequence. If I smile at you and you smile back, you're smiling back at me is the consequence for my smiling at you. That's all a consequence is in this. So let's take a look at one, just to kind of give you an idea of how they work. So you've got your date and your time, and you've got your columns, antecedents, behavior, and consequences. So here we have a parent who says, I was cooking dinner. My son was in the lounge near me. He kept making noises which were getting louder and louder, and his younger sister came into the lounge. Behavior, he hit and scratched his sister. Consequences, I ran into the room and yelled at him. I took my daughter with me to the kitchen. Other comments, I feel exhausted. I can't leave him alone or he's going to hurt his sister. So when we look at that and we step back and we go, okay, so the possible unmet need, it seems to happen mainly when he's not engaged with me or when I've been busy for a while. I think he's hitting his sister to get my attention and get me to come back and be with him. So if we use that as our hypothesis and go, okay, behavior, hitting sister when I'm engaged is something else. then we can look at some strategies that we can do to see if this will make a difference, and if we've gotten it right. We can ensure his need for interaction and engagement is met across the day. You don't leave him for long periods of time on his own. You can keep talking with him when you're busy. Involve him in daily tasks if possible. Help him engage in an activity that he enjoys when I'm busy, that's nearby or in my line of sight. And if that hypothesis is right, and we put those strategies into place, and he doesn't hit and scratch his sister anymore, we just fixed a problem. And it was as simple as that. It didn't require behavior modifications. It didn't require big therapies. It just required us stepping back and paying attention and trying to figure out what's going on. Let's look at another one. He was sitting in the living room watching his TV. I turned it off and asked him to get dressed. Gave him his clothes. He tipped over his tray of toys next to him and started hitting his head. I put him in his room until he calmed down. Then I got him dressed in his room. He was still hitting his head though and was really worked up. Other comments? It happens most days when I try to get him to do something. So again, possible unmet needs. It seems to happen mainly when I ask him to stop doing something and do something else. Maybe the change in activities causes him some confusion, or maybe he thinks I'm taking his enjoyable activities away. So if the behavior is hitting his head and getting upset when I ask him to get dressed, well, we can show him through pictures what the routine will be to get ready in the morning. We can show him pictures of the routine at each change of the activity. We can give him warning that an activity will end soon. We can show him that his preferred activity will happen again and when. And we can use a visual timer so they can predict when one activity will end and another will begin. Also, I want you to understand in the antecedents, he was sitting there and he was watching his TV program, and the mom came in and turned it off. No warning whatsoever. She unintentionally triggered a behavior that would not have occurred or may not have occurred if any of those strategies were in place and he had the warning that this was going to happen and he knew what the routines were going to be. I know I would get extremely upset, and I know a lot of men during football season or any sports that you're watching on TV, if your wife or significant other came into the room, turned off the TV and said, okay, we're going out, you would show a behavior. So when we keep those things in mind, those things all, they do really all come into play. Anyone have any questions so far? Anything?
I just wanted to remind all attendees that if you would like to speak with Suzanne directly, you can click on the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. To get into the queue, I can give you mic access once I know that you would like to speak with her. Or if it's easier, you can type your questions in the chat box. I can read it out loud to Suzanne if you don't have mic access.
Yeah. Feel free. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. Okay, so I've shown you two of those. So now, dealing with behavior issues. So we've got some key things here. The first thing is that, as much as we possibly can, we want to focus on prevention. Okay, so remember, I said that all behavior is a way of someone telling you about their needs, right? And everyone's unique. and they're going to have different needs based on their physical and emotional aspects of their environment. You know, there's times in our lives where we might experience gaps in our needs. And I know right now in 2020, a lot of people have a lot of gaps in their needs that they're trying to get filled. You know, especially when people around us change, our environment changes, our activities change. And sometimes those unique needs just mean that we can find it difficult to cope with what's happening around us. You know, your child might find it difficult to understand what's expected of them by just listening to what you're saying. They might have difficulties with processing and retaining verbal information, especially if they're already stressed. So the best way to manage challenging behavior is to try and prevent it from happening in the first place. And to do this, you have to understand what your child's needs are and what triggers a gap in these needs. And if you can help the child by addressing their needs, then your child isn't going to have to use a behavior that challenges to get their needs met as well. If you only focus on managing a behavior once it's occurred, it's difficult for your child to change their behavior because we haven't addressed what's caused them to be stressed in the first place or to have that gap in their needs. If we just try to, you know, if we just, you know, try to stop the behavior and go, that's enough, cut it out, or send them to their room or put them in the corner or stick them in timeout, you stop the behavior in the moment. But what you haven't done is you haven't addressed why that behavior was there in the first place. We need to rule out anything medical, anything dental. They could have a toothache, an earache, constipation. There could be numerous things that we want to make sure that we've ruled out. Again, we want to focus on trying to understand the behavior. What's the behavior telling us? Are they having difficulty processing information? Are they having difficulty anticipating what's going to happen next? Can they not meet their sensory needs on their own? Or if they're hypersensitive, the sensory triggers can be overwhelming. Lights are too bright. We have many grocery stores now that work with, in BC especially, with the Autism Society of BC, to hold certain days of the week and certain hours to be sensory-free zones. And this is where they minimize the amount of people that they have in the store. The music gets turned off. The lights are lowered just enough, just so that families or adults who have sensory disorders can go into these environments and experience shopping and do it in a much calmer environment. Over the years, they've also done that at Christmas time, where people with autism or other developmental disabilities can go and have their pictures taken with Santa before the mall opens. So it's a much quieter environment than what it can typically be. Is there any pain or any other health problems? Are they having difficulty concentrating? Maybe there's been a gap in people connecting socially with them, and they want to tell you something, but they just can't do it. So we want to place our energy into helping the person to meet their needs. Because if we can spend our energy and time supporting this child to meet their needs, then we're more likely going to end up preventing the behavior from happening in the first place. And this might mean changing what other people do around them or help them to develop some new skills. Meeting a person's needs is a preventative strategy to challenging behaviors rather than just a response to a behavior occurring. You know, and those kind of things are just should be happening for absolutely every single person. Rather than being reactive, we can be proactive and know how we can fix simply by just paying attention. And it means, you know, biggest thing, we have to slow down. We have to slow ourselves down so that we can slow them down. Because when we're in a rush and we're stressed and we tend to become more reactive when we're feeling the pressure and the stress and the rush and everything. And when we just slow ourselves down, then we're also helping them to slow down as well. So we want to focus on how we can reduce the person's stress, confusion, and anxiety. Keep in mind that a person's ability to learn something new and to do something different can only happen when their brain is calm. So when they're stressed and they're frustrated and they're doing their behaviors, that's not the time to teach them what they should be doing instead. You need to help them to calm first. And once the brain is calm, then they can actually hear. We want to adapt the environment. So what changes can we make in the physical environment? And what do people need to do to better support the person? So if the person is trying to seek engagement and connection from other people, then how can we ensure some quality time on a regular basis just to help them to meet their need for this social interaction? If they have difficulty processing information, then we can use picture symbols to help them follow and retain the information about what's happening and what's going to happen. Once we put the supports in place, now we've got our tools and their tools to help teach them new skills to meet their needs. So a visual communication system for someone who is nonverbal allows them to understand the language that's being used around them. And it's also giving them another way to say what they want and what they're thinking. We can help them recognize the emotions and the signs of stress and help them find ways to calm themselves in situations that are stressful. When my son was younger, when he would come home from school, especially if it had been, you know, a stressful day, he's got a lot going on in his head, and he comes home and, you know, one of the things that we did was he had a half an hour after school of downtime, meaning that was when he walked in the door, all I said to him was, "Hi, I'm happy to see you. I missed you today." I didn't ask him about school. I didn't ask him if he had homework. I didn't ask him anything. And then he'd go and lay down on his bed for half an hour and just download his day. Just take the time to download his day, process what you know, everything that had happened, how he was feeling, how he was thinking. Then at the end of the half an hour, him and I could come together, and now we could talk about his day. And he was ready. So I gave him a chance for his brain to process and to calm down. And then we could talk about things and find solutions to things that were in his way, rather than get at him as soon as he came in the door. You got homework, you better sit, and I'm just stressing him again. So just giving that simple strategy of, you've got a half an hour of downtime to just chill and de-stress. I know I wanted that too when I got home from work, you know, so we put this into place for two of us, meaning when I walked in the door, he couldn't automatically ask me if he could do something or have something. He had to give me 30 minutes. Let me change, get myself a tea, kind of download my day, and now I was better prepared for anything that he wanted to throw at me. And with that mutual respect, it was much calmer. at home. It was just that much nicer, but it meant that we really had to force ourselves to kind of slow down and just not rush through everything all the time. And I know that's easier said than done. This was not something that happened very quickly overnight. This was a process, but we kept to it and stayed consistent. And for us, it worked. Top tips for managing behaviors. So when difficult behaviors occur, it's generally helpful to take time, to stay calm, try to stay neutral, to give reassurance in a way that that person is able to understand, to be supportive and caring and to listen, to keep our language simple and give clear messages to the person about what we want from them. Remove other adults and children from the situation if required, because that can just be adding to the stress. Look and sound confident. Even if you're not feeling it, you need to look and sound, and I say this to my students too. You kind of like have to fake it till you make it. So being able to look and sound confident even when you don't feel it is calming for the other person. We want to intervene as quickly as we can. We can try to divert or distract the person. Things that aren't helpful: looking angry or upset, losing our temper, intimidation, talk a lot quickly or shout, confuse the person, have other people chip in, reignite the situation, being negative, saying things like, "You're just being naughty. Why do you have to be so bad? No, and don't." And we don't threaten. Those things are not helpful in de-stressing and desensitizing the situation. Those are things that just kind of add to it. And again, if you're having behavioral challenges and going through something and anybody does anything like that, what are your reactions going to be? And we can put ourselves into those shoes because we've all been in those shoes at some point in time. We know what's not helpful to us, so we need to understand that with others as well, whether typical or atypical. Final words, everything that I've talked to you guys about so far, this is all positive behavior support. This is understanding. This is about putting things into a positive frame point. It's just helping us to understand behaviors more. You know, so again, it's understanding that behaviors is a way to communicate something. And often behavior that is challenging is a way of telling us that the person has unmet needs, that there might be environmental or personal factors that will influence the person that's having those unmet needs. And our goal is to support the person, to reduce the need to engage in the behavior more than just to stop it. Most effort is put into preventing behaviors, not stopping behaviors. Our ultimate goal is to really understand the needs of the person and improve their quality of life. That's the biggest thing, and one that we should be putting in there for all of them. With that said, we're talking about, you know, behaviors that are happening on just that normal basis. When you're dealing with behaviors that are extreme, they're self-injurious, they're violent, you need further training, you need other support, you need other professionals on how to de-escalate those situations. We're talking about just the typical day-to-day stuff at home and in the community and in the classroom that we need to make sure that we have. Any behaviors that are going to be more extreme from that, that's a whole other topic right there. Whole other topic. And that's what I've gotten. Wow, I did that in a little under an hour. So I would love to hear what you think. Any questions that you've got, any comments you'd like to make, anything anybody wants to share.
Yeah, everyone. I guess we still have a lot of time for the webinar, and if anyone has anything to share, any questions that you'd like to ask Suzanne directly, I can give you mic access right now. The floor is open for any of your questions. And I guess something that other people are inquiring about is like if they're able to get a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. Is that something that you're able to help us out with, Suzanne, or is it copyrighted?
I can definitely make the PowerPoint available. Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah.
More than happy to do that. I can send it to you, Rika.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So for anyone who is interested in getting a copy of the presentation, I'm just going to convert it into a PDF file just so anyone can open that file format, and then I'm going to send it to all attendees through their email addresses that we have on file.
Sure, absolutely.
I guess if no one has any question, I guess I have a follow-up question in one of the things that you mentioned about giving clear messages to the person with disability. So I guess I don't have any background in education assistant or any human services program. Like as a regular person, like when I'm communicating with someone with an intellectual or cognitive disability, with the aim of giving a clear message to that person, is it patronizing if we keep repeating the information? Like, I mean,
no,
what? Okay.
It's not. I mean, it's the tone of your voice can be patronizing, but you know, if I want to make sure that I'm talking, and I'm not going to use big words and big flowery words that, you know, depending on the child's developmental age, whether or not it's a child, an adolescent, or an adult, I'm going to talk according to their developmental age. I'm not dummying it down. I'm just going to talk in a way that makes it easier, and I'm going to use as less words as I have to use, because the more words that you use, the more they have to process. So when we talk about just using simple language, it's just, we just want to take care of anything that is flowery for that. On one sec here, my apologies. I've got something going off on me here, and I need to return myself to D&D. Rika knows what I'm talking about. Okay, let's see here. Mary Lynn says, hi, I'm an EA. Hi, Mary Lynn. I have a student with behavior which is nonverbal, aggressive and violent, and they also speak a different language at home. Okay, so that's a big one there, because, you know, speaking that different language at home, plus what they're dealing with in English, I can see that this child would be having some confusion between how things are being said at home in that language and how they're being said in English within school. You know, so that's going to be a confusion for the child as well, because there isn't a consistency in the words that are being used. So that's definitely, I can see that being one of the issues. I talk to my students all the time about, you know, that cultural diversity and how a child can get confused and kind of stress them out when they're hearing it in one language that's also using different words in saying things to how we're saying things in English. Does that make sense to you, Mary Lynn? You know, so that's going to be part of his problem or her problem. One of the things that I would suggest is that if the child's nonverbal, if you're using a communication board, if there's a way to use some of the more important words that you want the child to be able to express, if they can have the PEC symbols, the picture exchange symbols in both languages on certain words, that way he's hearing both. You know, I understand that, you know, teaching English would be that primary thing, but because that barrier is there, sometimes it's helpful to have both languages that the child can hear. And if you can learn some very basic main words, you know, having that in both languages, I have found in the past that that does help in with some kids, especially when they're non-verbal. You know, because how things are translated from one language to the other, that's two different things. So we need to be aware of that part of it as well. So that's definitely something I would look at trying, and then seeing from there if that happens to bring down any of the aggression and the violence, then you know you've solved part of the problem. But chances are there's going to be there probably is other things that are causing the aggression and the violence. And again, you have to look at the environment and what the consequences are, and you know, are there any sensory issues that you're dealing with? You know, you've got that cultural diversity as well. So the more that you as an EA are understanding the child's culture, the more that's going to give you more of a clue in to who they are, and some of the unmet needs that you may not be aware of because of the culture as well. So that's definitely a possibility there. Yeah. You're welcome anytime. You know, it's just, for me, when it comes to, you know, whether I've worked with kids within schools, and I've worked with at-risk youth, and I've worked with adults with developmental. And for me, the biggest thing is, you know, let me get to know you, you know, and I have dealt with a lot of behaviors from a lot of kids. I've been kicked, I've been hit, I've been punched, I've been yelled at, I've been shouted, I've been called all sorts of names, and I've never taken any of it personally, because I've always tried to figure out, this is not personal. He's not saying these things. He's either testing me out, he's trying to tell me something that he's having a hard time understanding, or her. My job is to figure this out. My job is to get this child to understand, I'm not going anywhere. Go ahead and hit and kick. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out, and then eventually the hitting stops, the yelling stops, the shouting, the throwing things, and they start to trust, and they start to calm, because I'm getting to know them. I'm building that relationship. And so many of my EAs, I stay in touch with a good portion of them, and the experiences that they've had, it's all the same thing. Once they've made those relationships, and they really start to understand the student, and they understand the behaviors so that they can understand the student better, and they build the connections, the behaviors start going down. But I've never seen, for me, and this is just the way that I've always done things, there's no such thing to me as a good child or a bad child. There was a child that has unmet needs. There's a child that has either appropriate or inappropriate behaviors. And our job is to give them the tools that they need to meet their needs, but also to help them to express. You know, so I explain to my students, think if you've got a toolbox. Okay, when you're born, you're given a toolbox. If that toolbox has got all the right tools in it, you're going to be fine. And you're going to be able to learn the things that you need to, and process and understand, and you're going to be good. But if your toolbox has got all the wrong tools in it, that's not your fault. If your toolbox is empty, you need tools. You know, without those tools, you know, you can only use a shoe as a hammer for so long. Okay. Eventually, you're going to need a hammer. And there's different types of hammers, because different types of hammers have different types of needs, do certain things. You can't just have one hammer. You got to have different types of hammers. You can't just have one screwdriver. You need different types of screwdrivers. So it's the same thing when it comes to teaching behaviors. We need to understand what, the child who screams for one thing, another child screams, they're screaming for a completely different reason. One child who's throwing things, another child throws things for a different reason. We can't put them all. So each child has got their own special toolbox that is specific for them. We just have to learn how to fill it. But it means that we've got to do that paradigm shift and understand what behaviors are and what behaviors aren't. And I'm not saying that there are not kids who know exactly what they're doing and their behaviors are on purpose. Yes, because they've learned them. So understand that all behaviors are learned. All behaviors are communicating something. All behaviors happen in context. Okay, so if I learn that whining gets me what I want, I'm going to whine each time, and I'm doing that on purpose because it works for me. And until you can give me something else that's going to give me the same consequence and meet that need, I see no reason why I shouldn't stop whining. They can learn. But the majority of kids, it's all learned, but they're only doing based off of what they've got. And if they don't have much, then they don't have many ways to deal with what it is that they want to deal with. Just not there. We're supposed to be there for them. Help them out.
Fascinating. Thanks for that, Suzanne.
Oh, I could go for hours on, it's just kind of like behavioral. That's my niche.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I enjoy the most. And like I said, when I'm out, I watch people all the time, and I wish I could go up to certain parents and go, you know what? But I don't want to get yelled at by the parents. But here's the thing: if I see a parent really struggling, and a child is only down on the ground and having a complete meltdown, I'm inclined to go to the parent and go, is there anything I can do to help you? Because I get it on the parent side too. I understand that the parent is frustrated. They're embarrassed. Everybody's looking at them. And they're just kind of like, oh God, I just want to go home. I don't want this for happening. So it's I get it on that side too. We just need to make our paradigm shifts.
Irene from the chat box or from the Q&A box is actually would like to share that my son is very smart but always have trouble in writing stories in class. His teachers get disturbed after reading it. That's probably have like a thriller writer in the making.
Okay, so he writes stories.
And his teachers get disturbed after
He has trouble in writing stories in class. His teachers get disturbed after reading it. Interesting. Okay, so that is begging a lot of questions as to what the situations are where he's being asked to write stories, what words he has available to him to write the stories. I would love to see an example of where the story, nothing disturbs me. So I would love to see a story that he's written to kind of figure out what's going on. If he has difficulty writing stories, there's so many different things that can be done to help, everything from word wall to working it on computer rather than having to handwrite it, doing drawings with, so depending on their age, depending on their grade, but just because a child is smart doesn't mean that they're going to write, you know, and he could be a great storytelling. He's just having difficulty being able to express what he wants to express the way that he wants to express it. You know, and that's something that the teacher needs to recognize if she hasn't, you know, as to why that trouble is there. Because sometimes a child's performance is different than what we know they're capable of doing. There's this disconnect in between the two. And there are a lot of different suggestions, but I would definitely suggest, you know, talking to the teacher more to find out exactly what's going on, and what strategies she's got in mind to help with doing that. You can't always just leave it up to the child either. But thank you for that one.
Yeah. I guess as a follow-up question, into like not just Irene's situation, but like other among other things that you have talked about in the presentation, like for let's say for a neurotypical, like, or for a regular person like me who has no training on EA or behavioral language or autism, what is the quickest de-escalation technique that trained professionals have when encountering, let's say, a loved one with a behavioral language?
Once a behavior gets so out of control that now the child is flipping chairs and flipping tables and shouting and hitting and self-injurious, this is where we have there's specific training. There's two main types of training that's done. One is the nonviolent crisis intervention, and most EAs will have that training either in the programs that they've taken to be an EA or through the school district as a professional day. There's also MAND training as well, and it's not MAND as an M-A-N-D, it's MAND, M-A-N-D-T, and it's MAND training. And what MAND training does is that it deals with the challenging behaviors that nonviolent crisis intervention does not. More and more schools and more organizations like community living agencies and whatnot are going more over now to the MAND training as opposed to the nonviolent. Because again, it's dealing with behaviors that nonviolent does not deal with. And it's not about just putting the child into a hold or the adult into a hold. It's about the respect and the dignity of the person and the person who's having the behavior. So it's keeping everything and just being able to de-escalate as much as possible. And you can't de-escalate a behavior if you don't understand what the triggers are. So again, nonviolent tends to become a reactive, whereas MAND training is all about figuring out what the triggers are, and then as much as possible being able to prevent those behaviors from occurring, so that when some behaviors do occur, we have ways to easily de-escalate it. You know, so if anyone here, you know, is interested in finding out more about it, it's MAND, M-A-N-D-T, MAND training. So type it for you here, M-A-N-D, whoops, I can type M-A-N-D-T, MAND training, yep, MAND training. You know, so you can see it on the website. I don't know too many places that do it. We typically, up until this year, because of COVID, we have a relationship and a partnership with Pivot Point. So Pivot Point actually trains our students in the MAND training, because that's what they use, and all of their staff in each of their community classrooms also have MAND training as well. And my students seem to they really appreciate the difference between the two of them.
Yeah, I noticed that I think some of our education assistant program students at Ashton College actually touch base on demand training. I've definitely seen it in some of our other activities. So that's
Yeah,
definitely fascinating.
it is. It is fascinating. We've had to put it on hold for our current ones that were in class and had to go online
Hmm.
because obviously, you know, because you've got it's a 2 day, so you got a 1 day of theory and you have a 1 day of hands-on, and of course we can't do the hands-on.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because of COVID, we had to pivot some of our about our learning strategies. But I guess it reminds me that Suzanne teaches the Education Assistant Diploma Program at Ashton College. I guess
I
this is a
do.
good time to put in some helpful links about the host for this BrainBoost webinar, Ashton College. I'm going to put a couple of links in the chat box for anyone who's interested. We do run career programs in human services. Education Assistant Diploma Program being one of them, spearheaded by Suzanne Adams, as well as other certifications in mental health and addiction support worker. We all on the second link that I put in there is, or the first link that I put in there is about our continuing education courses. So this is kind of like a similar approach in our continuing education courses. We have quick courses for autism and ABA therapy, Orton Gillingham approach. More information are in the links, and if you have any, if you are interested in any of them, click on the request info button, and our team will get back to you.
And those are just smaller courses that we have. The dyslexia and the Orton Gillingham is 5 weeks long, every Wednesday night for 5 weeks. I took students through the first batch that we did, and it was fascinating because one of the students was an EA in Maple Ridge. Another one was a speech language pathologist from South Carolina.
Yeah, we get students from all
I
over the
was, you
world.
know, I was thrilled because she was someone that she worked with was leaving, and they had asked her to take on the students that had dyslexia. She didn't have a clue, and she found out about our program. So I was thrilled to have her in the class and was able to really give her the supports and info that she needed. So we had a great time in doing all of that one. So yeah, it's fun. I love teaching. Do
Despite online. So it's still fun to teach despite the COVID. Yeah, like all our programs and
online.
courses are online now, mostly because of COVID, of course. So even if you're in Australia, we have evening courses for North American time zone. So if anyone's interested, yeah, like we have all of those here.
Yeah.
I guess we still have time for more questions. I don't see anyone raising their hand. However, we do have, we're actually streaming this live on Facebook, and we actually just have a quick question from someone who tuned in there. I guess they're asking for some example of visual communication tools that you have touched based on earlier. Like, I'm guessing there are flashcards, and like when
So
you mentioned, yeah.
yeah, so that's using the flashcards. That's using what we refer to as the PECS, which is a picture exchange communications system. Um, if they wanted to find out more information about that, if they went to setbc.org.
Trying to find the link now. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so through setbc.org, you would definitely be able to see examples of a picture communication system. SetBC is also one of the organizations that works with schools to make sure that students have either a picture exchange system to communicate, visual schedules, a communication board, electronic on computers that can be done with an iPad, or on a phone. So that would give you a lot of really great info within there as to what they do, and how that works. And they also have a lot of videos that give you instruction on how to do a lot of those things as well. So hopefully that will explain it.
Sounds good. Yeah, I posted the link in the chat box as well. I'm also going to post some helpful links to the person who inquired over Facebook. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So supporting
Yeah.
students from K to 12. So it's all ages. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. I guess no one's. If no one has any other questions, any final words for us?
Any final words? I can smell my dinner in my crock pot. Sorry, it's been driving me nuts all day. I've been smelling it for 8 hours now. You know, is just for those of you that were here, and you know, everyone that's watching, you know, thank you. Children with challenging behaviors need to be understood, not punished, not disciplined. They need to be understood. Just as we would want people to understand when we have our meltdowns and our emotions and whatnot, we need to remember that that's got to be reciprocated. These are, whether or not they're typical or they're atypical. And if they're atypical, and we're talking about kids and adolescents and adults, you know, we really need to have that understanding of what your disability is. You know, if you're not verbal, you don't have a way to explain. So, you know, we've got to stop making the assumptions that they know better, because they don't. If someone has not been taught directly what to say, how to say it, and understand that it works for them, they're not going to figure it out on their own. That's supposed to be our job in being able to help them so that they have the quality of life that they deserve to have. You know, so I hope everyone has taken something positive out of this, and maybe one day our paths will cross again. One never knows.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for a very informative, it's major food for thought, strategies that even neurotypicals are going to be a benefit from,
Yep,
especially toddlers. I guess it's almost the same for
absolutely.
them. Visual communication, catering to those unmet needs. It all goes back to that, eh?
Yeah, it does. It does. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you once again to our attendees who took the time to tune in today. I see that we were actually coming from different time zones all over the world. So thank you for taking
Oh,
the time to join us in the
absolutely. Thank
webinar
you
today.
so much.